Everyone. So today I will be doing a video. Just see if this works. So I'm walking around the park right now. It's a beautiful morning at 7:50, and let's see. Yeah, I have this thingy to let me know that it works. Just make sure it works. Okay. So today I'll be doing a video about how to forgive yourself and dealing with shame and guilt. So, just for context, I was inspired by a comment that was in a video by Pondering Thoughts, who's this like amazing YouTuber who makes like philosophical topics about like deep stuff, right? So he was just talking about like affirmations and loving yourself and things like that. And there was a comment in the video that asked, hey, can you make a video on forgiveness and how to deal with shame and guilt? So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts around this. So just share a little bit about my journey and my thoughts on forgiveness. So I had a story that I was like not a good person because I was really hard on myself, and I said I wasn't a good son, wasn't a good brother, wasn't a good employee, and it was just really, really hard on myself, beating myself up. Like stuff like it's interesting how sometimes we all say things that we wouldn't say to ourselves that we wouldn't say with some of our closest friends, right? Like I don't know about you, but I've been guilty of saying, Davidson, you're so stupid, or, you're failing and you're not making enough money and all these different things, right? So I went through a lot of therapy, tried like acceptance, commitment therapy, tried like cognitive behavior therapy, tried EMDR, which is basically a lot of different types of therapy. And I went through this journey and realized that, man, I was just being really, really hard on myself. Like, just really mean with ourselves, right? Because I do think whether it's, having like the women I dated in the past, and I would be drunk and then I would do stupid things. Like there was one time where I made out with like another girl when I was like definitely in a relationship, and maybe it was like a couple years relationship, and it was just once, right, with that ex. But I remember like every time I did something that was out of integrity, I would just have like a very, very disempowering narrative of myself. Like I'd be like, oh, you're a shitty boyfriend, and it's almost like I neglected like everything else I did in the relationship because of like that one mistake, right? But I realized that it doesn't define you. It doesn't defy you. Like just because you messed up once doesn't mean, I'm not condoning it. I'm not saying it's okay to like go out there and like make out with other girls, obviously, right? But I do think it's important to acknowledge that everyone makes mistakes, and we're all human at the end of the day, right? Humans literally make mistakes. Like that's what we do, So the steps that I would say to forgive yourself is, and the framework that I would use to help you be kinder with yourself. And I'll just share what I have done, and maybe that'll inspire you guys to take some action. And yeah, if you like this topic, feel free to hit the like button, or subscribe if you're new. Subscribe. Welcome. If this is a new channel to you, welcome. Post where you're from, where you're watching from. Apparently, I have a lot of people from India watching usually. So I think forgiveness, like forgiving yourself, is just like loving yourself the same way you love your friends. Like like when people call me, whether it's like Adam or Gabby or Daniel, I'm really, really nice with them. Like I'm super, like I'm compassionate. I mean, usually, right? Unless they're calling me, unless we have an agreement that, you know, the reason they hired me as a coach or something like that is because, you know, they want me to help them take action, right? But usually, most of the time, I could still do that with love and care. And like, I could see, it's easier to see ourselves through other people sometimes, right? Unless it's someone that triggers you, then it's whatever it is about them that it's hard for us to be with is that, but that's a whole nother video. But so forgiveness is being kind with yourself, doing things that you actually care about. So sometimes that's taking a walk around the park, right? Like I'm at the park right now, and I keep telling myself that I love to do it, and it clears my mind and it gets me. I'm doing it super early in the morning, so it just gets me in a better mood. And yet I'm so focused on chasing the money, so focused on doing all these other things. And yeah, like money is important, obviously, to pay the bills and stuff like that. But it's just these little things, like treating yourself out, like, you know, even going on a date with yourself. Like, we spend all this money on our spouses and things like that. And sometimes it's hard for us to sit alone at a restaurant, right? But what's wrong with that? You know, sometimes it's nice to take care of ourselves and do things that make you happy. So for me, it's like doing the solo road trip was a big act of self-love. And yesterday I did go to the park, and I can't even remember the last time I did 2 days in a row of going to the park, right? But it's these little actions to show you that you're capable and you're worthy of being loved. So these little actions. So, and then one of the things, and the scariest thing I would say about forgiveness is reaching out to people, right? Anyone that you've wronged. So for instance, what I did was I reached out to a girl that I had a falling out with. She was like my little sis in the Greek life, the sorority / fraternity that we were both a part of. And I was just able to be with her and just hear her out, like what happened, like why did we have a falling out? And she shared with me that when she was pregnant with her twins, like I wasn't really there for her. I was too busy partying, and you know, I was spending time with you know, dating and stuff like that. But basically the bottom line was like, she was just like, hey, like I felt like you weren't there for me, you know, when I needed it the most. And she had kids like super young, you know. And yeah, of course that made me sad, but at the end of the day, I was like, I made peace with it. I was like, hey, I was like a 21-year-old dude, 22, 23-year-old dude. It's like, it's okay, you know, I'm not perfect. Hey, thank you for the like, appreciate it. And another, I called my dad, you know, for forgiveness. So it's interesting, right? I think once you forgive other people, you start to forgive yourself as well. Like, once I realized that I'm human and that my dad is human, I'm not as hard on myself, because at the end of the day, like he did the best he could. Just for context for people who are watching who don't know, my dad left us without saying a word once when I was like 15. So that really messed with my confidence. And basically, he wasn't around most of my life, so I was holding on to all this anger and all this like frustration, and I was just like, I had to like prove to myself and to other people, it's like, oh, I can make it without my dad. I'll show him, you know. But subconsciously, I was just doing it because I was like, I wanted him to love me, to be around. But I was too chicken to say this. So instead, when I called him the last few years, it's more like, hey, like calling him out. So yeah, it's been interesting. I definitely think once you forgive the people closest to you, and once you forgive yourself for holding on to that much anger, everything just makes sense. Like everything just works out, you know? Like I realized that once I called all of my old bosses and kind of figure out, like, I had a story that I was a horrible employee. So a lot of this, like, making amends process is you literally reaching out to people. And when you reach out to people, you realize that maybe you're not such a bad guy after all. And that's the part to deal with. So if there's shame and guilt around, leaving a company too early or not doing well in school, or, some of the quote unquote bad things you've done, or maybe just getting drunk one night, and, you feel guilty that it's like, oh, I should be taking care of my health. I shouldn't be drinking so much. I definitely had a lot of guilt around drinking and doing drugs and stuff like that. But honestly, it's fine, dude. Everyone's allowed to make mistakes. I mean, obviously, if it's really impacting the other person, like in my case, I'm in a marriage, right? So I have to consider my wife as well. But and then there's a lot of guilt around that, like, oh man, like, I'm in a marriage, like, I should be there for my wife. It's like, dude, you got to be there for yourself first, because you live with yourself. You are in your body like 100% of the time, right? So even if you spend a lot of time with your family and your wife, you spend more time with yourself. So don't forget to forgive yourself. And yeah, so I'll show you guys. So forgiveness looks like being able to let go of the past, let go of expectation of what you think it should look like, and just being grounded in you're trying the best, you're doing the best you can, and it's okay to mess up, it's okay to fall, and just remember that you are a good person. You're doing the best you can. You're an expression of love, and when you're connected to the universe, you realize that life is going to be okay, and that there is no need to worry, because things always work out. So the next topic is around guilt. So let me just share the distinction between guilt and shame. So I believe that guilt is, so shame, I feel like has a stronger connotation, like a little bit heavier. I believe that shame is almost like a regret. Like there's like a baggage, emotional baggage associated with it. And times I've had shame in my life is around something I perceive to be out of integrity with my values and my heart, right? So let's say, I was unfaithful to my partner. There's usually a lot of shame around that, right? Because you made a promise, or you have a sometimes spoken or unspoken agreement, depending on how you set it up, right? But everyone has different values. So one partner, especially if you're in a relationship, if you're in a marriage, like one partner just texting another girl could be like cheating, right? It's like, oh, well, emotionally you thought this girl was cute, so that's cheating. So I think it's important for couples to talk through some of these things, because everyone does have different expectations. And I mean, some of the unspoken expectations are like universally accepted, right? Like at least in America, most like people would say, look, well, yeah, if you have sex with someone else, like that's cheating, right? Oh, and I was watching this video in Japanese culture. It's interesting, right? Because in Japanese culture, it's like, oh, it's okay if you go to the host clubs, because you don't have like an emotional attachment with these girls or guys, depending on what your interests are. And that's a pretty interesting topic, but kind of derailing a little bit. So forgiving yourself, and I think shame is, I think as humans we all have shame. Like we all have things that we're not proud of. Like for me, sometimes I'm not proud of spending a lot of money or putting money on my credit card or having debt or being behind on payments, right? And I used to blame like society and systems and structures. I'd be like, oh, banks are bad. They're trying to screw me over. They're trying to get everyone in debt. Because I remember when I was in college, like not even having a full-time job, they gave me like a huge line of credit. And I think the first shame I had was like I would get invited to go to like vacations with my friends. And that was how I started spending a lot of money. But I was like FOMO. I was like, oh, like they invited me to go to Mexico on a cruise, on a Carnival cruise. Like I can't say no. And that was like one of the first debts that I took on. And there's like shame around that. But actually looking back at it now, I'm like, dude, like how many times are you going to be 21 and you get to go on an amazing cruise with some friends? And like, dude, that was like amazing. So instead of me beating myself up and being really hard on myself, I can just accept that that is part of life and just own my decision instead of have shame and guilt around it. It's like, so now a better way of looking at that incident is like, instead of, oh, that was what started this whole mountain of debt, which I'm not saying it's okay, but I think a more responsible way of saying it would be, I made the choice to take on, let's say it was $1,000 worth of, actually it was a lot cheaper back, well, plus the flight and then spending. So yeah, maybe 1,000. So I made the choice to spend $1,000 that I didn't have so I can have a lifetime memory with 6 of my close friends. And I wanted to live life to the fullest. So I'm choosing spontaneity and adventure over stability and security. Like that's a more empowering way to look at these things and have less guilt and shame around things. So let me know what you think of that reframe. Another thing that me and a lot of people have guilt and shame around is like gaining weight, for instance, right? It's like, okay, am I choosing to eat this barbecue ribs or chicken wings over self-discipline and having less body fat? So that's a tricky one, right? It's like should I live in the moment or should I live for the future? Most people, including myself, like we live for the in the moment. And it's hard to say what's good or bad, right? It's just a matter of preference. I mean, I see some people, they eat so healthy and I'm like, dude, like you gotta live a little bit. But I'm sure some people, they look at my diet and they're like, dude, like don't you want to live to 130? I forgot what the proverb is, but they said something like, oh, it was Tara Brock. It was during a meditation and she was saying, the doctor was like, do you drink? Do you go out at night? And then he's like, no, I don't drink. I drink water every day and I go to sleep by 9 p.m. It's like, oh, do you party? Do you do drugs? Like, no, I've never touched drugs. I never smoked weed, never touched alcohol in my life. Have you ever dated or whatever, got your heart broken? So he's like, no, I've been single my whole life and blah, blah, blah. So the fable goes on. And at the end of it, the doctor says, well, it seems like you've never lived ever, really. And that really blew my mind because some people, they can live to 100 years old, but if they haven't really gone out there and gone after their dreams, are they really living? Or are they just existing? So that was a very profound lesson that I enjoyed. Wow, this guy is running pretty fast. That's good. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this reflection on forgiveness and shame. And if you have any other questions that or topics that you want me to talk about, feel free to post in the comments, and I'll make sure I'll cover some of those. Always looking for suggestions. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit like. Cheers.